Ladies and gentlemen, welcome from Toronto to you, and I welcome here an old friend, Robert Archer of Pinnacle Silver and Gold. Glad to meet you in person again, Bob, after a year really, and we have to discuss interesting topics because Pinnacle is really making progress. Nice to talk to you today.
My pleasure, Jan. It's good to see you again.
Always my pleasure. Bob, let's start with one of the most recent press releases, and that was one with metal recoveries. The higher the recovery, the more profits you can generate, of course. In October 25, Pinnacle announced exceptional results with gold recoveries over 95%. Those numbers are remarkable for your first test. You still are in the refining process. That's not the end yet. Can you give an impression what that would mean for the project economics?
Well, as you mentioned, Jan, the better the recoveries, the better the economics, and the more gold and silver we have to sell at the end of the day. Yeah, for us to get an average of just over 95% on the very first attempt without any optimization at all was a really nice result. We're very happy with that. What it really demonstrates is that the gold is essentially free. You know, it's not complex. It's not tied up in sulfides or anything like that. So it's liberated quite easily. So that's going to be extremely important for the processing side of things. And we only ran 3 samples at that time, and you know, the range was all very close to that 95%. So it's not like we had a wide range. Silver, on the other hand, we did have quite a wide range from about 41 to 74%, indicating that the silver mineralogy is a little bit more complex. And so we are going to have to do, and we are doing, some detailed mineralogical analyses in order to determine, you know, just what the silver mineralogy is, and then, you know, with that information, we'll have a better idea how to process it in order to maximize the silver recoveries as well.
I read about this TIMA technology that you are going to use. What does it mean in layman's terms?
It's you know, it's an acronym, but it basically is the next generation, if you like, leading technology of scanning electron microscope, and then you know, all the data is collected digitally and processed and so on. So it basically identifies what the silver minerals are. And then from that, once we know what the chemical makeup is of the silver minerals, then we can better determine how to release the silver from those minerals. So it's an important step. We've taken 7 samples on this go around as opposed to the 3 previously. And the 3 previously were only taken from the one central mine of the 3 mines that we have on the main trend. This time around, we took 5 samples collectively from those 3 mines, and as well as one from the parallel Capelline vein, and then another from the Estrella vein, which is 500 meters away. So those are essentially new targets, and they both came back with very good grades on the head assays. But of the 5 that are on the main trend, we're doing the TIMA analysis on those 5 individual samples, but then we're combining the 5 and doing a composite, and then we'll process that you know, through the bottle roll leach tests and so on, because when you're mining these, you're not just going to mine one mine at a time. You know, you're going to be combining everything, and so when it gets combined and goes to the plant, we need to know what that combination looks like. So this is all important for determining the flow sheet design and the plant design, with, you know, what size and type of equipment we need to order and that sort of thing. So it's an important step in the process.
Bob, that was also included in your, I think, the last press release, but there was also something included that you start with delineation drilling very soon. And this is pretty interesting because usually as a mining company you start with surface drilling, but you are going underground pretty quickly. What makes this approach so different, or why did you choose this approach?
So two things really. One is just the fact that we have access to the underground. I mean, having those workings there and being able to sample them as we did last year. I mean, we've taken almost 900 samples underground to get a better sense of where the mineralized zones actually are. But in doing that, the underground workings are they're somewhat limited, and once you are underground, you're basically in a tunnel, or it's like a hallway, and you can sample the walls and the ceiling, but you don't know what lies beyond that. And so in some places, we're right in the guts of the system, so to speak, but we don't know really how wide it is. We don't know the extent of it, the shape, the overall grade. And so those are all things that you need to determine with the drilling. But given that we have that underground access, it's much cheaper and more effective to drill it from underground as opposed to going up on surface and then drilling long holes, down through the zone. And also, when you're underground like that, you can drill at much closer spacing. When you're on surface, you're somewhat limited by topography and access and things like that. Whereas underground, we can drill a series of 4 or 5 fan holes and then just move over 10 meters and do the same thing again. So you can do some very detailed delineation drilling. And so with that, we'll have sufficient information to start putting together a preliminary mine plan and, how we're going to mine this, what methodology we're going to use, and that sort of thing. So it'll be extremely important from that standpoint. And
it would have been the question what you expect from this program, maybe also a resource estimate? Or?
Well, we're not going to, at least the plan right now is not to go that route in terms of, an independent 43101 report and everything. We just want to push this forward as quickly as we can. And because we have the plant there, granted it needs some refurbishing and so on, but, everything we need is there to really get going on this. And we have a team both in Canada and Mexico to basically bootstrap this operation and just put it in production ourselves. We just want to move forward and just do that as quickly as we can.
You have to use those prices, of course, yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, if we were still back in an environment with gold at $1,500 or something like that, then there'd probably be a different scenario. But with gold sitting where it is over 5,000 and silver approaching 100 again, we just want to get to production as quickly as we possibly can.
And that will be a later question, but that should usually result in a revaluation of the stock also. If you produce and then generate cash flow, that's a totally different story then.
Yeah, it certainly will be, and I think there will be, there will be several opportunities for a re-rating as we get to that point. As we reach some fairly significant milestones in terms of permitting and making an actual production decision, things like production financing, which we're working on, and being able to announce something like that, whereby we can finance all the capex that we need without going back to the markets, without further dilution. So, things like that, as we make those key announcements, I think, each of those in itself could result in a bit of a re-rating.
And you plan to decide to go to production by year's end, right?
Well, that's the current goal, yeah. It's there are always things that might get in the way, or things don't go quite as quickly as you'd like them to. But right now that's the goal, to get to the point where we can make that decision, because it'll probably take about a year to from that decision point to actually get to production. That's the goal right now.
And I read also in your press release, you mentioned already your existing plant, 100 tons per day, that there is a power line in close proximity, 3 to 5 kilometers or 3.5 kilometers. You intend to start connecting the project with the power line shortly?
Yeah, so what we found in discussions with the CFE, which is the Mexican acronym for the Federal Electrical Commission, is that they require us to do an independent feasibility study with a contractor who is familiar with that type of operation, and they would be the ones to actually install the power line extension. And so we've engaged a contractor to do that. It should take about 45 days from what we're told. And the power line is about 3 kilometers in a straight line, but because of the topography, we'll just follow the road. So it'll probably be about 4.5 to 5 kilometers. You know, in order to do that, you have to have a right-of-way along the side of the road, which in itself requires an environmental permit. So there, you know, there's different stages that along the way that you need to go. The contractor, the feasibility study will determine things like how many poles we need, what gauge of wire we need, you know, how many transformers, what the actual power supply is currently and what we require at the plant and that sort of thing. So, you know, these are all different aspects of that feasibility study that will give us a much better sense of what we're looking at in terms of time and cost and so on.
I have to go back to your ore for a moment. We saw grades of gold 7.7 grams per ton, silver 100 plus, but you also had high assays. I read here, and it's from one of your press releases, 85 grams gold per ton. That's fantastic, and 500 grams silver. How does it compare to similar projects, maybe to the Topia mine, which is close to and to which you have some connection? Is it?
Yeah, there's a little bit of history there for sure. It's similar in the sense that the mines in this district and elsewhere in the Sierra Madre can be very high grade. The specific geology of El Potrero is not quite the same as Topia. Topia is a polymetallic mine. It's mostly silver, lead, zinc with a bit of gold. And most of the mines around us, including Tahueto and San Geronimo, Cienega, you know, we have 4 operating mines within 35 kilometers, but they're all polymetallic. You know, ours is just gold and silver. There's no base metals whatsoever. So it's slightly different geology despite the proximity, but nonetheless, you know, we do get those bonanza grades once in a while, which is really nice because it brings up the average, obviously. Even without those, you know, the specific samples that we took are still a very, very good grade on average. And you know, the other veins that we sampled as well, Capelina and Estrella, are in that same sort of ballpark. So once we start to drill those and build up a little bit of a resource on those as well, then that's certainly going to add to the overall potential of the project.
Are you happy with the project size as it sits there now, or do you already looking elsewhere to expand it?
Well, we're working with what we know at the moment, and we'll, you know, once we get to the drilling, we'll be drilling those zones off, get to understand the geology better, and then we'll expand outwards from there. But certainly right now we have everything we need to move forward towards that production decision.
And to reach the production, that's always a question that's interesting for investors. You mentioned already the dilution. How much do you guess? You do not have a preliminary economic assessment or more detailed studies yet, but do you have a rough guess how much it would take to bring it into production?
Well, you know, if you just look at the basic numbers that we're considering at the moment, you know, you mentioned 100 tons per day for the plant, roughly. With those grades that we've just sampled, you know, that's almost 10 grams per ton on a gold equivalent basis. So at 100 tons per day, that works out to about 10,000 ounces per year on a gold equivalent basis again. And so that's, I think, just as a very high level estimate, that's what we're aiming for. And you know, I think the cost should be just on average for that type of deposit, and you know, small scale underground mining. And there are no shafts to worry about or anything. It's just the mineralization is actually when you tunnel into the side of the mountain, the mineralization is above you. It's not below. So with these epithermal deposits, you know, the vertical extent of these things is not huge. They're more laterally extensive. And so, for us to just go in there, we don't have to worry about sinking shafts and building head frames and all that sort of infrastructure. So I think the development and the mining costs should be quite reasonable. So that's where we're anticipating fairly healthy profit margins, and as a lot of the rest of the industry is experiencing right now, and that's really why we're really pushing hard towards getting into production as quickly as we can.
And how much do you guess would be the capital requirement to go there in millions of dollars? Do you have an estimate already?
Yeah, well, again, quite high level, but one of our directors, Dave Solari, is a metallurgical engineer based out of Toronto, and his firm is actually working on 3 other plants in Mexico right now. So, he has a very good idea of what it costs to get something like this back up and running. And so, Dave and his team has given us a preliminary idea of the capex required, and even with a little bit of working capital thrown in there, I mean, we're probably looking at less than $5 million US. So it's a very, very reasonable amount of money. We're not talking tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to get this up and running. It's that's another reason why we're fairly confident that we can just push ahead and do this ourselves.
It's a fantastic number. 5 million is, in this environment, Bob, that sounds like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm right, then you wrote also there that your plant is scalable. Okay, you start with 100 tons, and then if everything goes well and you have the mill feed, you surely plan to extend this, right?
Yeah, that's entirely possible. These plants can be built up over time if that's justified. But right now the main focus is just to get into production and just and build from there. There are a couple of things that are important. One is that even despite the reasonable costs of doing this, we still intend to do that through a production financing, through an offtake agreement, and we're in discussions, to do that. And so it's we don't intend to finance this through further equity financing. So we're trying to minimize any dilution for shareholders. The other thing is that even as we're moving forward with this project, we don't necessarily need to wait until we're in production before we make the next acquisition. I'm already looking for where the next one is going to come from. And, in an ideal world, I'd like to have another one this year, but we'll see how things play out. These things always take a little longer to put together than you'd like them to, but nonetheless, that's the intent, is just to keep building. So despite the relatively small size of this project, it's just a means to an end. It's just the first step, just as Topia was for us with Great Panther. It was only 150 tons per day when we started that, when we bought that in 2004, and we had it back in production in 2006, and now it's owned and operated by Guanajuato Silver, but 20 years later, it's still going strong.
Yeah. Mm. And do you want, with your new acquisition that you want to stay in Mexico? Because Mexico right now, it's in the headlines. El Mejo, they killed a criminal there. Do you see there any dangers, or is this something that came and goes again and will calm down? What's your impression?
Yeah, it's, this whole situation in Mexico has been coming and going for the last 20 years or so. And it flares up once in a while, and then it calms down, and then it flares up again. And it can be quite regional. Even before the current situation in Jalisco, there were issues with the Sinaloa cartel in Sinaloa. And not to say that that's gone away, because it hasn't. But again, it's somewhat regional, because a lot of the violence and everything is between rival gangs fighting over territory. and territory is regional. So it just depends on how their specific businesses are set up and what they're focused on. You know, with the Jalisco cartel, for example, you know, they were into fuel smuggling and things like that. You know, as well as drugs and arms and you know, all kinds of things. I mean, these are very, very extensive businesses. You know, that's something that is just, I think, coming to light for a lot of people in the media and so on. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, this isn't just about little parts of Mexico where guys are you know, smuggling drugs and whatnot. I mean, this is a big business, you know, and it very much involves the U.S. So we'll see. I don't want to get political here,
topic.
but
We
I don't
rather
want,
avoid it.
that's right. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yes.
But you know, suffice to say that where we're working right now is fine. You know, our guys are in there, and we're providing jobs for the local community. We have
And
a
you are
really
in
good-
Mexico for decades. You
I've
know
been
how
working
to
there
deal
for
with
30 years, so a big part of it is just being aware of your surroundings, knowing the culture there and the communities and who you're dealing with and so on. And you know, importantly, we've just signed a community agreement with the local community, and we have very strong support. I mean, that whole area is a mining district going back, gosh, almost 500 years now. You know, Topia district goes back to the year 1538.
Many of such endowments
Another
from the
12
Spanish.
years, yeah, another 12 years, and it'll be 500 years of history. So it's pretty remarkable, and so that's ingrained in the local culture, and so the people, they understand mining, they're supportive. I mean, the Topia town, for example, has tripled in size since my first visit in there in 2003, and we brought that mine back into production. So they understand the economic benefits and the social benefits as well, because you know, the mining companies provide health benefits and medical and education and things like that, as well as just infrastructure upgrades and so on. So so there's very, very strong support.
Bob, to look ahead for this year, what catalyst, to summarize your intended progress this year, can investors expect, look forward to?
There should be a number of them. I think will be a very exciting year for us. You know, last year we did a lot of the preliminary work, made really good progress in that regard over a one-year period. But this year, I think we really will see some milestones reached. So there are various permits that we need to acquire. You know, I've mentioned the electrical line, environmental permits, both for drilling and then ultimately for the plant, tailings dam, and water permit, which, you know, we've been told verbally that we're getting the water permit, but they have to go through the formal process and all that kind of thing. So that takes some weeks to do that. But, you know, being able to announce that we specifically have those permits in hand, you know, will certainly be important in terms of advancing the project. The drilling, both underground and then surface, you know, once that starts, then once we start getting results and can release those, we start to see how, you know, how that develops. And then the production financing is another key one. Once we can announce that we have production financing to move this project forward, that's really going to be key. And then, of course, we just move into the construction phase and rebuilding the plant.
Finally, a question for you as a silverback. I guess you are a silverback as me. What's your guess? Where will this market go? I think we see a complete revaluation of silver. The trade is shifting from COMEX and London to the east, so the paper manipulation is slowly dying. I really think that this is a permanent revaluation, which will, of course, change the economics for many mining companies completely and also move them to new dimensions with respect of market capitalization, of course, because I think right now the general investor is not realizing that those stocks, producers, although they had a nice run already, but explorers, still many are very cheaply valuated. I think there is a lot of potential upwards. Also, as I said, the silver price, I expect it to remain high and maybe even increase with those demand. We had a deficit for 5-6 years now. I think we are still in the right market.
Yeah, it's a tight market certainly, but having been in the silver industry for over 20 years, I've seen this kind of pattern before where silver consolidates for a period of time and then it basically goes parabolic in price. And then we see a correction where it comes back about 50% from where it started. And then it'll consolidate there for a while, and then we'll have another run up, and then it comes back down and consolidates again. So, that sort of hockey stick pattern is quite typical for silver. And we've seen a fairly violent upturn, in part because we've had such a long period of consolidation. And the longer it consolidates, the more violent the uprise. So we've seen that. It has consolidated back about 50% retracement, and now it's consolidating again. But the basic fundamentals that are supporting silver and gold are still in place. So I think we're in a long-term uptrend for both metals, and it's really investment demand that's driving it. It's people talk about the structural deficit and so on, and that's there's truth to that, but that in itself isn't what's driving the price. You are getting a tighter market, but I often liken it to companies that have if they're just starting out and they only have a few shares on issue, it's very easy to drive the price up if you come in and buy a lot of shares. But if nobody's buying the shares, the price still doesn't go anywhere, right? So just the fact that it's a tight market in and of itself doesn't change the price. You have to have that investment demand, and that's really what drives the silver price. And it's such a small market. It's a tiny, tiny market, even with respect to gold, which in itself is small relative to
bonds,
everything else. And bonds are huge, but if you just look at the total market cap of all the gold companies in the world, it's comparable to just one of the top tech companies like
maybe
Apple
it reached
or something
Microsoft
like that.
now. It's still nothing.
It's exactly, and silver is even tinier. So it doesn't take very much in the way of investment demand to drive those prices when things are that tight. So I think we'll continue to see this for quite a while, and given the recent geopolitical events of the last few days, I'm curious to see how the metals are going to open this evening. So it's interesting times indeed.
Oh, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah,
isn't that a Chinese saying?
Chinese curse, I think it was actually. Yeah, be careful what you wish for, as they say.
Oh yes, that's true.
Yeah.
So we are looking forward to many interesting news this year, and whoever wants to know more about Pinnacle Silver and Gold can go to your website, obviously, to Goldzeit, and also to see it in German, press releases. Thank you, Bob. I'm looking forward to the progress, also as a shareholder myself, of course. It was a pleasure to talk to you today. I wish you a good conference, and see you next time, probably on Zoom again.
Okay. Thanks very much,
Thank you for
John.
today.
Take care.